Welcome to this interview series. My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Douglas Noonan from SPIA at Indiana University in Bloomington. Welcome, Doug, and thank you very much for joining us for this interview series.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Doug is going to give us more insight about his article published in Small Business Economics in November 2020, entitled Looking for a Chance in Scene, Analyzing the Mobility of Crowdfunding Entrepreneurs. This article is co-authored with Shiri Breznitz and Sana Maqbool from University of Toronto. And I would like to start my first question. Could you please tell us more about what is this article about?
Sure. Well, this article is about the mobility or relocation decisions of entrepreneurs, specifically entrepreneurs who are operating on an online crowdfunding platform. And we used Kickstarter, one of the big ones in the United States and globally for this. So in a way, we're looking at online or digital entrepreneurs. And if they have more than one project or more than one venture they're starting, we're looking at what happens between these two ventures. If they choose to relocate, and then conditional on choosing to relocate, we look at the ones who did relocate and thought, where were they coming from and where were they going to? So we had essentially individual level data to see and track these entrepreneurs and basically follow them and try to model why they're choosing to go where they go. We were looking at sort of general factors like they're moving towards population centers, they were following socioeconomic indicators or distance, or they were just going for weather. Maybe it was climate. But then we also looked at crowdfunding specific indicators. So were they influenced by whether their previous campaigns were successful or not? Did it matter what kind of crowdfunding work they were doing? If they was in technology or music and film or something like that, did that affect with what they were doing? And did they care about the crowdfunding conditions at their destination city? So we looked at a bunch of these factors and tried to model what best explains these relocation decisions.
Can you tell us why your article is important and what do we know from your paper that we didn't know before?
Well, so I'll do the second one first, I guess. What we learned was that people are moving to big cities, big cluster. So that wasn't so much new. And we learned that people tended to move shorter distances and not longer ones. And in the United States context, we learned that they're tending to move a bit westward. And in some ways, while it's not new, it's interesting because of this population of people who are doing creative or entrepreneurial work online and doing this stuff in a virtual setting, very digital. They don't need to behave in a lot of the same ways that brick and mortar style work needs to follow. And yet they were acting a lot like everyone else. And so that part was interesting and new. The other part that really mattered that we didn't know before was how important prior success in their campaigns mattered. So if you failed your first attempt, you were more likely to move than if you were successful. So success let people realize that they were in a good place. But then it went beyond that. It meant that the more successful they were, the more sensitive they were to other crowdfunding factors in explaining where they went. So successful entrepreneurs tended to go to cities with other successful entrepreneurs in the same type or same category of crowdfunding work. So this ability to see the birds of the feather were flocking together, that homophily effect we hadn't seen before. And so that was something that was new. And that how much of this depended on the category of work that the entrepreneurs were working in, again, whether it's sort of technology or film or whatever, how that really was genre specific or category sector specific. That was new and interesting and important. But as we were watching these people move towards their peers and not away from them, they weren't shying away from competition. We realized this is really important because it shows the importance of the networks and essentially support networks, whether it's the support networks of the backers, the funders of these campaigns, or just having peers who are working in the similar space. Being around them apparently mattered. There was a strong attraction by these creators to other people who are working in that same crowdfunding virtual world. So even though it was virtual, the geographic pull was real. And I think this is very important as we look at more footloose entrepreneurs, gig workers, people in these platform economies. This is raising a lot of questions about location and the importance of geography and understanding the actors who are on these platforms or in this new and emerging and growing world of the economy. And so we have a great insight to that. And that's why I think this is really important work in that way. questions about whether, going virtual and digitizing things flatten the earth or not. The earth is not flat. It's not getting flatter. If anything, it's getting spikier. And being able to look at early stage entrepreneurs, I think, is important, and not looking at ones that are going after big venture capital only. It's important to look at the little guys in this too. And last thing on why it was important, I think one of these we are asking about or questioning is whether or not these are sort of side hustles. People who are working in crowdfunding platforms, this isn't their real job or their real investment in many cases. These are sort of weird, small scale side hustle sorts of projects. And if that were really the case, we wouldn't expect the crowdfunding factors to matter at all in terms of explaining big economic decisions like relocation. And in fact, they explain a lot. And so if these things were really just side hustles that didn't matter so much, I think we could discount a lot of what's going on these platforms, but we can't, because the crowdfunding factors themselves explain a lot of the relocation decisions. They're not just side hustles.
Right. Please tell us about the history and the story of your paper. How did you get this idea? What was the very early beginning that gave the outcome of this paper? Well,
so I've been playing with crowdfunding and Kickstarter data in particular for years now. And as I dug into this world, one of the things that struck me was about sort of really creative or unconventional uses of the crowdfunding platforms themselves. It's not just simply an exercise in putting an idea out there and raising money and then maybe executing the idea. There's a lot more that goes on, and people use it in a lot of other unconventional ways. And so that got me interested in this, and we wanted to see, well, where is all this action happening? And we did an analysis of this already, and we showed that people are clustering in big cities. And that was a very static story. It was a very static model. And so we saw that where the hot spots were that mapped onto population centers, but it didn't tell us anything about the dynamics. And so we really got interested in, well, let's track some of these people and see where they move. And we've got a great, rich data set so we can actually follow sort of individuals and get the dynamic part of this story. And we were interested to see if people are moving out into rural, remote areas because they can, or are these birds of a feather flocking together? When people look for a change of scenery, what kind of new scenes do these people look for? And we were really interested in seeing whether or not this, to be honest, part of our hypothesis is this was just going to be random noise, or it was going to be mapping onto general economic factors like population or cost of living. But we were thinking it's entirely possible this would really just be random, or you're moving because of your spouse's interests or something that's just unrelated to the crowdfunding exercise. And when we found that the crowdfunding factors mattered a lot and mattered in interesting and important ways, that got us really excited to follow through with this paper and track and do the dynamic analysis, because it was important to us, I think, to really test this question of, is this epiphenomenal? Is this crowdfunding business just a good story, or is it really important? And I think it ends up being, for at least these people, it's really important.
Exactly. And this brings me also to my next question. Where do you see the research on this topic going forward? What are the new ideas or new directions you're working or you wish to work following this paper?
Well, I think we still need to learn a lot, both where the backers are, the financial support. So we're studying the relocation decisions of the creators, the entrepreneurs, but where's the crowd? And we have an idea about where the crowd is generally. We think it tends to be more local, but we don't know a lot about who this crowd is and where they are and where they might be moving and how these connections are working. And so I think we need to study that a bit more. We need to learn a lot more about other sort of individual level factors about these entrepreneurs, especially their household and other intra-family conditions and how those things might matter. But where I'm going next with this, in particular, I'm interested in a couple things. One, I'm doing some work on the effect of the pandemic and crowdfunding, given that the nature of this kind of platform and a lot of this work, but also that it's all online and people had to shift to online, and yet there's a big economic disruption and so on. There's a lot of really interesting questions there. I'm also interested in how the relocation and clustering of this talent, of this entrepreneurial talent, does this actually predict other indicators of entrepreneurial activity that are sort of more conventional or outside of does it spill over outside of the crowdfunding world? Are these really early stage entrepreneurs that eventually have their activities manifest in ways that move other needles that we normally care more about. And then last, I'm interested in looking at these platforms themselves for their ability to nurture or support creativity and novelty in economic activity. So some of this is about the maturation of markets on crowdfunding platforms. It's very uneven in the landscape out there. Some of these sub-markets on crowdfunding platforms are rather mature, and most are really idiosyncratic and not well developed. And so how do you move from idiosyncratic and not well developed to a more mature platform or market on the platforms? That's something that's really interesting to me, as well as sort of related to that sort of legacy effects of different crowdfunding ventures. What are the effects of that project on subsequent entry of other projects, subsequent success of other projects? So that, you know, how do you build on past projects, and how does the platform do it? I think there's a lot of really interesting questions there as well.
Great. Can you tell us how we can apply your findings, or do you have any advices or insights to give for practitioners that want to use your findings?
Yeah, I think the big finding for this is about the importance of networks and support networks. And so that gets used by a couple different practitioner perspectives, I think. One, it speaks to people running the platforms themselves about how important it is to the users of these platforms, apparently, where they seek out other people like them who are also using the platform, and they'll even relocate to be near them. And there's something about the support networks, whether it's the financial supporters, the backers, or other creators, other entrepreneurs, and being able to be near these and have these sort of positive peer effects. And I think that can matter to a platform to realize these support networks are important, and what can the platform do to cultivate more of that and make more of that happen. Also, though, I think there's a big game going on for inter-metropolitan, inter-regional competition to attract talent. And I think there's a big lesson here for policy makers and people who are trying to attract talent like this and attract entrepreneurs to your town, that one of the stories here is it's not just having good theaters in town that'll do it. It's actually having other people like the people you are trying to attract. And so in some ways, it's a case of the rich getting richer, which is a bit of a problem, but there's some hope here. And that it also says there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, that these creators are attracted to not just anybody who works on crowdfunding. They're attracted to people working in crowdfunding in their same category or sector. So there isn't a single approach that's going to get all of them to come to your town. You're going to have to pick, and you can specialize in Nashville can go after the music, or the Bay Area can go after music and film, or something like this. You have to go and specialize and take a different approach for each of the different types of entrepreneurs or talent that you're trying to attract. So these clustering forces are strong. They can be leveraged. These people aren't moving randomly. They're moving systematically. And that gives practitioners hope in terms of policy to attract them. The trick is now you got to speak in their language and find things and peers and networks to support them, and then they will arrive.
Thank you very much, Douglas. It was very inspiring, and thank you again for sharing your insight with us today. For our readers and listeners, you can download the article from the Springer's website, and we wish that you enjoy reading the article. Any last comment, Douglas?
Nothing except to say thank you and to say this is exciting stuff. It's a strange new world we're going into, and I'm happy to be part of that.